Welcome to the webinar, Bring Your Own Content into BSD SpecLink, Strategies for Transforming Your Office Master. Let me introduce today's presenters. Joining us today, we have Matt Johnson, Senior Product Manager at BSD SpecLink. Matt has spent the last 30 years in product management with a focus on construction specification products. Matt joins BSD SpecLink from Arcom, where he served as a CTO. Also joining us today is Gary Christensen. Gary is a senior customer experience educator here at BSD SpecLink. He has been teaching construction industry software for over 20 years. He's a proud member of CSI and maintains his CDT certification. Last but not least, we have Holly Jordan. Holly is the Director of Specifications at Perkins & Will. She has produced specifications for a variety of building types, including K-12 schools, as well as higher education, science and technology, multifamily, hospitality, medical, commercial office and retail, and many more across the world. I'm also very excited to take this opportunity to announce that Holly is the new chair of BSD SpecLink's advisory committee. And now for the webinar, I'd like to turn things over to Matt. Matt?
Sara, thank you. All right. So maintaining an office master. I've heard that the most popular form of an office master at some firms is, well, what did we do last time? So if you're joining us today and your goal is to introduce some best practices and actually begin the process of maintaining an office master, there should be a lot of valuable information that will make that easier. If you've actually undertaken the effort to weave all those lessons learned into some version of an office master so that you've retained at least some sort of corporate memory, and you're finding it difficult to make sure deleted content from one project is actually available when the next project comes up, or to deal with the myriad of problems that expand exponentially when you don't have a single source of truth, we've created this webinar with you in mind. By the end of this webinar, you should have a solid feel for the options available in getting your MS Word-based content into SpecLink, and the pros and cons of the different choices that you can make along the way as you match the content and workflow to what works best for you and your firm. So here's how we've laid things out. We've broken today's webinar into 3 parts. In part 1, we'll address the value of maintaining an office master in SpecLink so that all involved parties have access to the most updated version at all times. Then we'll take a look at how we take a firm's office master and unwind the customized ways they've oftentimes put their corporate memory into a wide variety of methods of documentation. And if you're concerned about how disorganized your office master is, I'll be showing one of the most challenging office masters we've ever run across, but still managed to bring it in all into SpecLink. In part 2, Gary Christensen and I will take a single section all the way through this process. You'll see the key steps of importing an office master into SpecLink, then the linking and creating smart content, making edits, and outputting it to the final project. And then in part 3, and as an experienced user who's actually gone through this process herself and helped other firms as well, Holly Jordan will go over the different ways design firms utilize SpecLink and discuss the pros and cons of each and identify some of her strategies to get the most out of working the cloud and optimizing your workflow. And hopefully, if there's time, we'll finish with some Q&A. So while it's always been possible to bring your content into either SpecLink E, our legacy product, or SpecLink Cloud, the process could be very time-consuming or expensive or both. One of the reasons we wanted to make it easier to get the wide variety of Office Master content into SpecLink is because we've seen our user base change so substantially of late. While the BYOC, the bring your own content segment of SpecLink users used to be relatively modest, it's taken off and really grown exponentially as a percentage of our user base these last few years. This has been especially true of what we call the owner's market. This is a group that brings their own content 100% of the time, and they rarely had any best practice restrictions over how Office Masters were written and organized for content. That was really never intended to be used on anything but their own internal projects. So we've ended up with not 2, but 4 ways that firms use the Office Master content once it's within SpecLink. Some users use BSD provided content exclusively. There's obviously a group that brings your own content into the system. But there's a couple other flavors as well. There's a hybrid. So sometimes people will import that content and manually weave it into the BSD content that we provide, kind of getting the best of both worlds in that case. And then sometimes people import the content and literally leave both the BSD content and their own available side by side and leave it up to the spec writer, and they can pick that as appropriate as the needs arise. Once these projects are created, we actually have different workflows as well. And there's some firms that use SpecLink all the way through and benefit from the collaboration and commenting tools built in to make sure that changes, they all flow back to that single source of truth. But then there's firms that really prefer to create a project from an office master, make major decisions and set specific choices within the text, and then they output to Word for the remainder of the collaborative editing process. And SpecLink works with all of these Office Master content variations and with both of these workflows. So regardless of how you use SpecLink, there are some problems with self-managed Office Masters that should quickly be a thing of the past.
So now I'm going to talk about the difference between Word-based and data-based specs. So in your self-managed Office Masters, some of the problems you have editing by deletion. You have Word-based documents, and if you delete it, it's gone. You're going to have to hunt down, cut and paste, or recreate information. So a data-based software like SpecLink, everything's retained and memorialized. You don't delete anything, you turn things off and on. It takes a little effort to change your thought process from deleting to clicking on and off, but in the long run, it's a great advantage because everything is always there. Now, when we talk about formatting, you get documents from different sources for different clients, and they have their own formatting in them. And it is very easy in a database software to make a template one time and use it. Everything looks the same with a click of a button. So when we talk about reference standards, this is something I just love this. Not only are they up to date, but they're live. They are or can be linked to your source document. So they're live, I can click on it and I've either linked it to the source document that we have in our office, or it's linked to the website for the reference standards. So unique client information has to be edited individually during master setup in a self-managed Word-based documents. Because this is a database, you add terms once and all sections are changed at the same time. We're not worrying about leaving the wrong city or office or client name somewhere hidden in a section, especially when you have hundreds of sections, a couple of hundred sections in a project manual. There's always one that sneaks by, but this way in a database, change it once, it's changed forever. So spinning off your masters is difficult. It's very easy in the database to change and add another master. You can change your template, you can pull in sections from other sources, and your office master is unique or different. Your new scope of work for a client templated document is so easy to copy and adjust. So it's easy to build off what you have. So with that, I'm going to let Matt talk about import services.
Thanks, Holly. Okay. So I want to make it clear before we show you how import services work that we do have a limited import capability, and it's built right into SpecLink. Using our import services group, it's not the only path, but we can take a significant burden off the spec writer by handling as much as possible, anything that we can possibly automate, then leaving just the work that requires someone with a spec writer's experience to take the rest of the way. The process we're going to demonstrate is the one handled by our import services group. So here's what can be automated through our import tool, what we can't, and how we'll train you to finish off those sections for tasks that require train specifier to do so. So we'll go through and we use language like we normalize something. We can take a lot of disparate sections that have they're annotated different ways. The section number appears in different formats. We clean all of that up and bring it in. The parent and child levels, the parent-child ontology. I think we're all familiar with this this formatting issue where you can have something that might look good on its face. Sometimes you're using proper paragraph styles, sometimes it's body text, sometimes somebody's gone through and just used tabs and spaces. And when you're actually bringing that document in, you want all that formatting stripped away so that it can live within SpecLink, and the templates can set that so that it's absolute, that you don't have to worry about going back and fixing all of that every time there's some sort of a change. So we actually have a lot of technology into making sure that even if you have sections that utilize 3 to 4 different methods of doing indentation and so on, we can unwrap all that, make sure that it's all cleaned up in an automated way on its way into the system. We do editor's notes, office master, and project notes mapping, making sure that those end up in the right place. And sometimes those are pretty straightforward. Sometimes they can be pretty complex, and I'll show you an example of that. Choice group mapping is important. This is the bracketed types of text that can go through and represent in an Office Master choices that need to be made before it actually goes to the client. I'll show you an example of that. We actually do tagging of colored text if you've utilized certain strategies when that Office Master, you could kind of document things any way that you wanted, and you have green text or red text, we can actually tag that. So even though it shows up within the document in regular black text, the person editing it can still see the intent. And then obviously we import tables and give a direct review of those imported sections. So Gary's going to be showing some of the other things that are done once the section is imported. Those include things like global terms, updating reference standards, in the individual linking and tagging of sections. And part of this whole process is making sure that you're comfortable with kind of the part 2 of getting your sections into to SpecLink, the stuff that comes after the automation. So we actually, in all circumstances, when somebody signs up for SpecLink, there's regular training that we provide to all of those users. But we have a special jumpstart training session that's actually built around editing your content. So even though we're kind of going through it fairly quickly today, you'll have an opportunity to selectively go through and edit your own documents and make sure that you're kind of trained on that content, and you can answer questions as they come up and make sure you're comfortable moving forward. So if you're interested in seeing whether this is the best way forward for your firm, the first step is pretty easy. We'll take a look at the 4 sections to see what your Office Master looks like. You know, usually we use something from section 8, but we can take a look at pretty much anything, just something that's representative. It's quick, and it gives us everything we need to see how easy or how challenging that import might potentially be. And since we have a machine learning process and have been doing this for more than a year, we've already seen enough variation to handle just about anything after we've already addressed it once. So once we've seen some unusual way that somebody's organized an Office Master, and we've kind of built it out to handle it for that particular a document coming in, when the next person comes along, it's already been handled. So we've got a pretty good reservoir of knowledge at this point to make that a pretty easy process. And in most cases, that import's going to be pretty straightforward. From there, we take all your content, so we get potentially several hundred sections, and we'd set up an import strategy meeting. And this is important. There's a lot of subjective decisions that we need to make sure that you're on board with. So we'll talk to you a little bit. If we got any questions about how your Office Master's laid out, we'll cover them in this meeting and walk you through the different decisions. Our normal import process takes about 5 days. We'll actually set it up within SpecLink and give you a chance to review it, see if there's anything that's been missed or you don't like about it. And we can always take another pass at it if there's things that need to be adjusted. And there's kind of normally about a 5-day period for doing that, where they can either accept or adjust it. And then the last couple steps, there's that SpecLink Cloud training, followed by that customized Jumpstart training for you and your staff. So one of the reasons we have that strategy meeting is to review how you'd like your choice groups to appear once they're inside SpecLink. Currently, we can interpret 9 different types of choice groups and automatically map them to their equivalent functionality in SpecLink. These might be radio buttons, checkboxes, fill in the blank. But there's a difference between showing all possible options on the printed page and converting that to a drop-down group that can potentially only show one choice at a time if it's a single choice required, for example. So you may not want to infer that that choice is the default or the preferred choice when someone's editing later. So we have a lot of pliability. We can set all these options the way that makes the most sense for those documents, so that you don't lose anything in the translation. We can even do something like set something to be TBD, to be decided, so that we're not inferring that one choice is the preferred one. So we don't really lose anything by not having all the choices listed there and having one potentially set as you go in there. So we'll go through all these subjective decisions so that you can apply your preference to all similar product groups going forward. So if your firm has not exactly been adhering to any type of industry best practices in maintaining an Office Master over the years, this should really be of interest. What you're seeing here is some content from one of the more complex set of masters we've ever successfully imported. This is easily my favorite because it allowed us to show just how far our import process has come. Now, this company came to us with an Office Master that looked like a mess on its face, but there was so much good information here we just didn't want to lose. For example, notes weren't always on separate lines. Sometimes they were at the end, or sometimes they were nested right in the middle of a paragraph with text we needed to retain on both sides. In some cases, different colors were used to designate what this firm called base text. In some cases, it meant the requirement would only apply doing work for a particular state, or some colors referred to sustainability requirements. All the things that normally are taken care of in a much more elegant way in SpecLink, they developed a process to try to retain all this information in there. And it was done with colors and a lot of undocumented things like sometimes text highlights could be choices if they were highlighted in yellow, or rarely used content was highlighted in gray. And to make things more complicated, because different divisions were maintained by different authors, it meant that what was true for one division wasn't always true for another. What's on the screen here are the explanations for just the 4 types of blue text that appeared on a single page. As you can imagine, it's rarely documented. That's why we do these review sessions, to get all the informal rules down, or in this case, multiple review sessions with the different authors to make sure that to make sure that we really understand what all those different variances mean. And we're essentially coming up with what's a rule. How should we interpret this every time we see it, so that we can bring in hundreds of sections in a single pass, and we don't have to rely on an individual spec writer to go through and unwind and interpret this, one section and one decision at a time. So the reason I'm showing this is I'm hoping to leave you with the impression that if we can unwind something as complex as this, I have a high level of confidence that we can handle, yours as well. So with that, part 2 of our webinar. We thought it would be helpful to see a test case done from beginning to end. While we normally do these in pretty large batches, we're going to focus on a single section, in this case 087111, door hardware. And we're going to take this all the way through, giving you kind of a quick tour of the key steps of importing an Office Master into SpecLink. We'll show the user-assisted machine learning process used by our admins to confirm whether the predicted formatting, we read in the document, we predict what each element is, and we do a quick confirmation and kind of, confirm things, or say, no, that's not actually a paragraph level 2, it's actually a paragraph level 3, and we can sort of fix these things as they come up. From there, once it's actually imported and actually in SpecLink Cloud, Gary Christensen is going to demonstrate the linking and the creating of smart content in this very same section, making the edits and outputting to the final project. All right, so bringing this up here. So stepping through the process really quick, I'm going to go through and select that MS Word section. I'm going to say it's a CSI 3-part document. That's reading in the content here, and all my unconfirmed predictions are on the left-hand side. I'm going to go through in kind of the machine learning training area. I'm going to go through and say, yes, that is in fact the different element here. Normally when you make a decision for, it could just be, one section number, it kind of confirms them for, 50 sections at a time. So there's the section number, there's the section title. Now we're going through and it's identifying the individual paragraph levels. And sometimes these can come from tabs, spaces, things like this. So we're stepping through and confirming each one of them. And then more and more of the unconfirmed predictions for all the sections that might be part of your import are handled because we've said, yes, this is the right approach. What you're seeing there is actually a paragraph level 5. As we get through this, we continue working on down, and we should eventually get down to, let me see, we've got one more, paragraph level 6. There we go. So next up should be our notes. Now we can actually do 3 different types of notes here. We're just going to classify these all as editor's notes, but we can break these out a little bit. And then we move on to choices. And this is what I was kind of referring to before. We don't just go through and say, yes, this is a choice. There's 9 different types. We bring them up here and we can show you, once it actually makes it all the way into SpecLink, this is how the text will appear. Then we'll go through and say, well, these are the different variations. We can take those 2 choices and we can, in this case, check the first one. We can say, don't set that choice, just say this is to be decided. And so a spec writer can review it later. We can add a fill in the blank, we can do all 4, or we can just mark everything. And what we're doing, even though we're just taking a look at one instance, we're saying this is how we want to handle all things that are like this in the future. And it'll go through and for hundreds and hundreds of sections, as long as they line up that way, that's the way that we'll handle it kind of going forward. Now we have a lot of different variations here. In this case, this is a mandatory choice. It's so we have a radio button, but we may not want to give too much preference to one or the other. Meaning some people actually want to list it as to be decided. Others might go through and say, we'll go through and actually pick the first value there, and that's what they'll see going all the way through. So each different type of choice group, regardless of what section it appears in, comes up here, and we'll make sure you're comfortable with all of these individual choices. Here's one where you've got to fill in the blank. And we can go through and leave a fill in the blank empty, or we can use the existing text to say, to fill that in and provide a little bit of that guidance as to what should actually be in there for the user. So here we could say, well, do we leave it blank? Do we actually use the word insert allowance so that the text, so it's still a fill in the blank, but the text insert allowance is sitting there waiting for the user and providing a little of that guidance? We're going to go ahead and select option 2 here. There we go. And then we have one final option in this document. There we go. Let's pick option 5. We're going to get everything checked. And then our tag should be the last one. We're just going to tag some red text that's in here so that we kind of preserve the context. Then we're going to save the section. Now, normally we do these in fairly large batches. We're just going to run 1 so it goes quickly. We're going to go ahead and let that finish. And as soon as it's done, we'll close that out. Beautiful. Then we'll bring it up in SpecLink. Now we can actually go take a look at the actual section within SpecLink. All the formatting should be cleaned up at this point. Let's see, division 8, 8700, and here we are, door hardware. All right, so all the formatting's been removed. It's all cleaned up, and it's ready to go. So once it's at this stage, this is normally where the second part of the process kicks in, and I'm going to pass things over to Gary to handle the adding smart content in SpecLink section. So let me see if I can pass things over to him. There we go.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt, Holly, Sara. Thanks for asking me to be part of this. And thank you all for taking the time or making the time to join in today. I lead a lot of different webinars for BSD. And they could be a quick roller coaster ride through the system. They could be a full-on training for maybe it's a 3-hour new user training or a 2-day full-on training. But the Jumpstart trainings have been really interesting for me because it really gets into each client's head. You know what I mean? You really figure out how they want to work, and that's very interesting. It's a bit of a challenge, but it's very interesting for me. So the concept of the Office Master is incredibly powerful. So with all those different types of webinars, there's lots of times when I don't get into showing any kind of detail with this type of thing. And this, I'm very thankful to be able to spend some time doing this today and running through some of this for you. So we'll start with basically, I'm showing you my screen here with the Word document that Matt just described. So you have the notes that he mentioned. There's a couple of different styles of notes here. You also have, again, in Matt called it the ontology. It's really the hierarchy, the parentage, whatever you want to use for that to go from 1.1 to A to 1 to lowercase a, that type of thing, which is so important throughout your specifications. But you also, to Holly's point, always from her perspective and such an industry kind of icon here, you want to be able to make this what you make it, what you want it to show, and that's something that SpecLink Cloud does very easily for you. Creating your own format template, we'll show you what that looks like. It's one of the last things I'll show you in my limited time today, but it goes to the point. If you spend time in your Office Master really making it what you're going to need it to be in what all of your users, all of the specifiers in your organization, what they're going to need to do with it, the more time you spend making it a little more automated, a little more seamless, the less time they'll need to do that. They only need to match it to their project. So it's kind of taking the best of and allowing them to then make it for their project. And it's a very important concept. It's an incredibly time-saving concept. So a few things I'll point out here in the Word document just to kind of put a little more of a point on this. You've got your notes and your hierarchy again, but then you have these choice fields. Matt did a great job talking about different types of choice fields. So we have some pretty interesting ones that go along with the related requirements, and you've got different things like this, except or including, very simple choice field. Now, if you're using, a Word document, you've got a backspace over all these things. All right, and it's once you do that, that's that. You're saving your Word document and moving on from there. So those are the kind of things I want to show you how in the import process, what it looks like when it's in SpecLink Cloud, but you'll also see a small list, really a sample of reference standards, more than anything, just to note, hey, we got to keep track of our reference standards. I've actually had people say that's one of the reasons they have migrated over to SpecLink Cloud, because of how it handles your reference standards. There's a lot of different things here, and I'll give you one other example. I'll make a point of this note here down in the action submittals, this retain shop drawings paragraph. We're going to come back to this, but I'm going to cheat a little bit right here, and I'm going to copy this just because I can, and I'll copy that. Now, if we head over to SpecLink Cloud, this is what that section looks like when it's just brought in. All right, so I haven't done any, or minimal, I should say, work. I did one example for you that I want to show you, but this is basically what it comes through looking like. So again, that parentage, that hierarchy, and one of the things that takes a little getting used to with SpecLink is your use of your sequence numbers, so your paragraph numbers here. And you'll notice as I move down from door hardware to part 1 to section includes to mechanical door hardware, you'll notice the level bar change. So every paragraph has a parent level all the way back to literally 0 at door hardware. Nothing else can be activated if door hardware isn't activated. And activated in SpecLink Cloud means I want that to print. I'm selecting that so that it prints. So we've got the hierarchy, the parentage, the ontology of the paragraphs built in right from your Word document. All right, it's a great thing. We've got all these related requirements with their choice fields. So I accept or including, which do I want to pick? Okay, now this is one style of choice field, very helpful. You've got to choose one. It's a radio button, you got to pick one. Over here, if I click, I get this and. So I could say for astragals or for door silencers, great. This is an and statement, or I could just leave one or the other. But this checkbox allows me to select multiple versions of that. So it's a pretty big deal. Now I'm going to come down a little bit, and I'm going to go all the way down and into part 2, and I'm going to find the action submittals. And when I get down there to the hinges, a little past there we go. You all watch me blow right by it too. There we go. Now let's say I want to add that paragraph in. I can do that very easily. In fact, if I hit enter there and I paste that content in, now I can actually identify that however I want to identify that. Probably not with a whole bunch of 8s, Gary, probably with some asterisks or some stars or whatever. And then I can actually use the tags. And tags are a great tool. I'll show you a couple different things on tags, but I can use a tag to say, I don't want this paragraph to be selected or to print. The only thing I have to be aware of is the parentage again, and make sure that I'm not cutting off anything below there, and that's done properly there. We've got an example of that as we dive into the much more automated section. So you'll see I have a lot of tabs open on my browser here, and you'll notice I've got multiple versions of this. So we're going to talk about different things that you can do. All right. Some other things that we want to point out are all those notes that Matt showed and that I showed in the Word document. They show up as these blue note cards. So you can do an inline note like I just did, or, and what I think a lot of people do is they love the idea of having the notes in this side window. And before the question comes up, because it comes up on almost every training I do, can I print those? Yes, you can. You can print the project notes. So does that now save you the work to put them in line? Probably, but some people still like them in what we call inline or in the middle of the text. You can do that again, making them non-printable, making them non-selectable, that type of thing. So you can look at those project notes as you go along and see that information. And this is really a great visual. Somebody says, okay, well, in our Word document, we had notes about these things. What was the note? Well, I need to know more about that. I can click on there and see that entire note. One of the things, and Holly may want to add to this, but one of the things I know that they've done is they've added photographs to different things, whether it's inline. I think more than not, though, they add them to these project notes. And I think if Holly has a point now, she may even make that a bit later. Go
Yes,
right ahead.
I do. I have customized our documents immensely more, and I will touch on that later. But you can put pictures, you can put links. SpecLink in their sections already has some links and things, but I've taken it and, like I'll say later, a step further, and I've really customized and added more to that.
Excellent. Excellent. So this over here, this sidelit window, I like to call it, is the sequence manager. So basically, anything that gets tied to a sequence in particular will show up, a note, a link, a tag, things like that. So we talk about links, the SpecLink, you hear the word all the time. Basically, and I'll give you give you 2 basic examples of linking. Now, remember, keep in mind, as we're building all of this and using all these tools in our Office Master, it only benefits the people that will then import this section into their project. That's really one of the staples of an Office Master. Give them the best that it can be, and then let them work from there, type of thing. So we've got our notes in. Now we want to build some automation, and we put some links in. Now, some links could be, hey, when I activate this section with sequence 0, I want part 1 to go yellow. I want it to be suggested for review. Maybe I want to turn part 2 products on. I'm definitely going to turn end of section, the last paragraph, on. Those are some things that our sections, the BSD content, does automatically. So we can mimic that kind of thing. And as I move through the versions of this, you'll see those things get built. We get a couple of ones that I tested out just to make sure I had them for this exercise, but you'll see different links here for reference standards and things like that. And we'll show you those a little bit clearer before we're done. But tags, another very important thing we talked about a bit ago, where you could tag a line item for a report, whether it's a shop drawing, a sample, a reference standard. It could be in installers qualifications. There's all of these different report tags, but you also have the ability to decide which paragraphs you want to show up in your outline view. So SpecLink does a great job of being able to allow you to say, nope, just show me my outline spec right now. And you can decide which paragraphs. Go ahead, Holly.
Okay, so this is like really, really important to spec writers. Okay, so when somebody comes with a set of Word documents and they say they want an outline spec, we get mean and grouchy and say no. Because when you do an outline spec in a Word-based document, after it's used in schematic design, for example, It's trash. It goes in the garbage. You can't use it anymore. But if you have it this way and it's linked and tagged, you can, and Gary will show you, you can flip back and forth from the outline to the full spec, and all of your work is not for nothing. So I want to say that I love this, and I use this a lot. It's wonderful.
So 2 real uses for tags. View tags let you switch back and forth between, full spec. Full spec is really preferred from our specs team simply because you can't miss a paragraph if you're in full spec. But to Holly's point, there's a lot of times where you need that outline spec and you get to decide where it is. And I know there are plenty of people online today with the hundreds of people that have joined in that have heard me on webinars before. And one of the things, one of my mantras is you get the last say. In SpecLink Cloud, you get the last say. What links work, what links don't work, where you see different paragraphs tagged, what report is going to show up in, all of that kind of stuff. One of the other things I want to show before I move on to really the next version, if you will, is the ability to add in a reference standard. And again, that goes very much to the tagging. So if I come down a little bit, I'll find my reference standards. And we added a couple in. These came over with the import, but this one in particular is really the way you want this to be, because if it's our reference standard, if it's one of the 2,000 plus reference standards that we track and update, you're going to get that capability. You're not going to have to keep track of NFPA 80 anymore. So the way this works is that the reference standards article in part 1 is tagged in a manner that allows you to drag and drop reference standards anywhere in the body of the section. So if I come back down to part 2, let's take a look at one of the very first paragraphs in part 2. It shows here that that's the NFP 80. Well, let's see, we've got NFPA 252 over here. Well, it's brought over directly from the Word document. So I can come over here to the document manager now, the other side of the world, and I can look at my reference standards and I can do a very quick search. I'll show you how easy this is. This is one of those things I run into when I'm working with people doing the Jumpstart training that they feel overwhelmed with. They think, geez, I can't even get this. It is this easy. Find the reference standard. If it's one of the, like I say, over 2,000 that we track, grab it and drag it into place. I'm going to put it right where it needs to be, right about there. And then what I can do in either one of these situations is simply backspace over that text. And that's cool, because now I have NFPA in here and I know it's going to be updated. And by the way, anytime you do that, if I click on that, it's going to bring me to, it's going to open another tab on my browser, and it's going to bring me to a place where I can learn more about that standard and quite possibly obtain it if I need to. But here's the gigantic win. Come back up here and you'll see NFPA 252 has now been added, the full-on BSD version, so you know it's going to be updated. So this, even though it's a user section, you will still be able to get updates for the things that we've built for you, like the reference standards. That's a gigantic win. So in this point, I would come here and I would simply delete that user paragraph. Yep. And now I'll come to NFPA 80 and I'll delete that user paragraph and say, yep. And now let's move on to version 2 that has a lot of the linking built in. So if I come over to user A version, now I'm in a new tab. It's the same section, just a little bit more amplified. Watch what happens. First, we see a lot of these related requirements have been built in. And take a look at all of these reference standards. This means I took the time to go through this section and drag the right ones over so that now when somebody else uses this section, all of this is done for them. All right, and that's really the beauty of the Office Master. You can keep those things updated all the time. All right, so let's take a quick second, go to the Sequence Manager and take a quick look at links. All right, now look at all of the links I've built in here. Now, this is a little overwhelming, but I'm going to try to make this super easy. If I go to Sequence 0, the door hardware, this is the very top. This is the section title. What happens when I click on Sequence 0? Well, part 1 general is going to turn to this yellow state of suggestion. It's going to have a yellow bar next to it. Part 2 products is going to turn on for me. It's going to activate for me. And then any links that I've built in from part 2 to then cascade down will turn on for me. Huge, huge win. All right, part 3 will be suggested again, and end of section will turn on. And normally, what we would do in ours is build in a link to the table of contents. Did I leave that open? I think I did. So this is what that table of contents would look like. It would automatically turn that on for you as long as the table of contents section was activated. You would need to come in and enter this because it's a user paragraph. You would need, if it's a user section, you need to put this entry in, but then it will activate it for you if you build the link in, right? And that may be, again, something that the Office Master allows you to do a whole lot easier, or your team members. And that's, again, one of the main goals here. So that's all kind of cool. What happens, Gary? Click on sequence 0, and you're going to see that little yellow link. All right, well, what if I click on part 1? Now, normally we say, go to part 2, go through part 2, and go through part 3, because as you do that, things will start to activate. Like you'll start to see all of your reference standards start to activate by themselves. The link is all built in. All right, but now pre-installation meetings, that's got a yellow bar. We want you to really take a look at that. Action submittals, because part 1 is now activated. If I came down to part 2 and part 2 is activated. If I activate manufacturers and I come down and let's just say I'm going to, let's see where, all I have to do is activate the paragraphs here, but I've got to stay within the lineage, the hierarchy, the parentage. If I click paragraph 166 that has all of these standards in it, what happens? I come back to part 1. This is why it's kind of an important thing to understand. It doesn't mean you're right or wrong to start at part 1, but this is what it's going to do for you. If you activate all of your paragraphs and do your editing through parts 2 and 3, you can come back and see the results in part 1. A lot of work will be done for you. So let's move over to kind of a fully vetted section out here. All right, keeping an eye on my time too. So when we're looking at a fully vetted section here, we've got all sorts of links built in. So somewhere in parts 2 or 3, I activated some paragraph that said, hey, you need to turn mechanical door hardware for the following swinging doors on and electrified door hardware. So we know what some of this is going to contain. Okay, pretty important. What if, there's one thing that I do want to show, want to make sure that you see and understand that global terms are one of these things that, again, just automate a lot of this, make it a whole lot easier. Maybe somewhere along the lines, I've got to enter in the contractor's actual name. I can grab the contractor's actual name and drag it over somewhere if I need to do this, and you'll see to be determined, okay? The reason I'm showing you that is because I can come here and go to the contractor's actual name and say the contractor's actual name is Chris Contractor. All right, and for those who watched me before, hey, my typing's getting a little better. So if I go back there and I go back to the contractor, wait a second, that already updated. Look at that. So again, global term, it updated throughout the entire project for you. Huge win there. Okay, global terms are very, very useful. A lot of the global terms are already filled in for you, the state, the city, the project name, the project ID, but you can update these things from here and you can add your own, build your own global terms in. Again, huge win. The point being able to automate a lot of these things for your team members as they start to use these sections. All right, some things that Holly mentioned that I want to point out. There are a couple of toggles up here that I think sometimes people forget that they're here. At any time, if I want to just see what's active, I can go from normal view to active view, and it's only going to show me the paragraphs that are going to print. Okay, so if something's tagged non-printable, non-selectable, you're not going to see that here. But if I scroll all the way down through, I'm going to get through part 1. I'm going to see everything that I've selected that's active in part 2 and in part 3. And you can see all of these different choice fields, all of these different reference standards. There's all of this automation kind of already built in for you, all the way down through part 3. And then I've even got my built-in links to turn these things on because I always wanted to make sure that these things were always appearing. So then we had a place for people to say, hey, I prepared it and I checked it and when it was issued and all that. And then end of section down the bottom. All right. So pretty important to look at active versus normal. Remember that that's there. The other one, huge deal again, as Holly pointed out, I can go from full spec view to outline view. And in one click, see just the things that are in outline view. Okay, now I can be in outline view and go to active view and just see the things that are in outline view that I've activated to print. So there's a bunch of different ways you can combine these different things. One other thing I can do that I feel like is incredibly important. Mentioned this kind of at the beginning when we were looking at the Word document, okay? If I looked at the Word document, it has a very specific style to it, the numbering, the font, that type of thing. Again, kind of like the global terms, you can build in what you need and it gets reused over and over again. If I go from CSI format and say, geez, today on this project, we really need to make sure this is AIA format, I can apply this to the section. Very quickly, I get a different font, different spacing, that type of thing. I could even customize this and say, wait a minute, we have our own, I use a fictitious specs company, Park and Ride Architects, and I can actually say, hey, I want this to show up in our font. I want to get rid of the 0 from 1.01. So you can make this look the way you want, customize the headers and footers, customize the page setup, put your own page breaks in, that type of thing. I'll go back to the original. And now just a quick word as I wrap up with some output options. All right, see some of these things that people aren't aware of yet. So I can actually go to the print menu. And with the print menu, I have the ability to print out documents or document drafts. And I want to be clear about documents. So I can do the whole project as one single file. I can export this as one PDF. All right, I can actually put blank pages in where they need to be. I can put the header and footer on those blank pages. I can have a watermark on those blank pages. I can customize that watermark. We showed this to Holly yesterday. That was a huge win. I like it when Holly's happy. So if I come up here, I can actually look at what that would look like. Now, one of the features on this menu is bookmark for PDF. And that bookmark for PDF allows you to come over here and say, well, show me all of the sections. Show me the section information, show me the table of contents. Now I can see everything that goes along with that. This page left blank intentionally, header and footer on there. Maybe I want to get down to the door hardware. This is a huge win too, being able to see this, and this is what your section looks like. Nice. Couple other things to point out. If from the menu, let's go back where we were. From the menu here, if I was to choose not to export as a single file, exporting, I could even go to Word documents, and I've done that. And when you don't export as a single file and you have a whole bunch of sections, it shows up as a zip file that you can download. So you'll see each one of your sections as its own Word document. All right, so a lot of people have mentioned that to me in the trainings. We don't usually do it as one file, Gary. We like to break it. You can do this for Word documents or for PDFs, which is what most people do. They bring them out as PDFs. I want to show you have the options of doing both of those. One other thing to show you is you have the ability to create reports. And the reports allow you, right there, reporting. I'll figure out where all these buttons are. Reporting allows you to do a few different things, like create a full text manufacturer report. So I want a list of all the manufacturers. I want to put a cover page on it. I want to include the untagged subparagraphs, all that type of stuff. So I can scroll down and through. We'll get down to our section here, and we'll see all of the door hardware manufacturers listed out. So now I have a report that shows me all of my manufacturer listings, just an example, okay? And the one last thing I'll point out that you can do from the reports menu, I'll figure out where it is a submittals report. In fact, this PDF is kind of cool, but it just kind of tells you what has the shop drawings, what has product data, what has samples. Doesn't give you any real meat, no real data. Well, the log, the Excel export, shows you all of that. Shows you where the section is, what the section title is, what the tag is, what sequence number, and shows you exactly what's in that particular paragraph. So it's a huge win for a lot of people. As I show this, every great once in a while, I'll have somebody say, whoa, slow down a second, show me that again, which is great to see. So appreciate the time and letting me kind of walk you through some of this basic stuff when it comes to Office Masters. And keep in mind, you have a guide available to you in SpecLink Cloud. This little question mark, you're going to find videos and articles to see a lot of this content. So with Matt, I'll pass everything back over to you.
Good deal. All right. Excellent. All right. So to finish up, we're going to talk about pathways to success, and Holly's going to take us the rest of the way.
So we previously briefly touched on the different types of documents, and now I'm going to expand on this and talk about the different document types and some of my experiences and what I've done. So I wanted all of the document types listed and shown on the slide together in kind of a circular continuous pattern to show that you can use one or more or a combination of each of the methods. So we talked about the import services. BSD can import and standardize your documents. You can send them your documents and they take care of most of the import process. And we had some of this done for our Perkins and Will masters. Not all of them, but just some of them were done this way, a big block of them, okay? Or you can do a self-serve import. That's where you import your own Word documents. And a lot of people get a little bit nervous about doing the importing their own documents, but I do it all the time. And a couple of the things that's like really important to remember when you import your documents. First off, if you mess anything up or you think you're going to mess anything up, you can always call SpecLink, and they're like really great. You get a live person every time, and they're always happy to walk you through it. And I am always happy to help people and walk people through and help them with this. So one of the things that you need to be conscious of is when you're importing a Word document, some of them are kind of sloppy and messy. You need to take out all the page breaks, the section breaks, the extraneous returns, and any funky symbols and all of that. And that helps them to like import pretty nicely. Now, sometimes there's some stuff that's like hiding in your document. Sometimes those section breaks are hiding in there, and it kind of messes with it. So your post-import editing, mostly what happens is you need to increase or decrease your indents. It's kind of like tabbing. So, but you don't have to like go through and indent each one every time, all the time. You can indent multiple lines and create parents, and like it goes pretty quickly. What I really did on our documents was a hybrid approach, a little bit of everything. So we had BSD import some of our documents. I imported and linked some of our documents. I used the SpecLink content and fine-tuned and added our corporate memory and our information, or I used SpecLink sections in their entirety. So that's the approach that I really like to use, and that's what I use for our clients, which brings me to professional services. You can work with a private consultant, a professional spec writer to help you evaluate and decide what approach you want to use, whether you want to import a document, whether you want to import and link a document, whether you want to use SpecLink content in its entirety, whether you want to do a hybrid approach to some of the SpecLink sections and add your own information in it. So that's the approach that I use for our clients. We evaluate all of their documents and then we make a decision together. So next slide, please. So this is what we call a list of Holly's favorites. The things that when people ask me about SpecLink, these are some of the things that I usually always mention. Okay, so some of the advantages are templates. I create a template, and once it's done, there's no change in the headers. I don't have to format each document. I don't have to go in and change headers one by one. I don't have to check them. The documents look the same every time, which I really love that. We label the origin of our content. So when I import a document, I like to know where the documents came from. So it's very easy to like click on a little three-part button in the tree of the document, and I rename it to, if it is a Perkins and Will master that came directly into SpecLink, I put PW, or I put a user, or if it came from a project that I created a spec for a project, we put the project number out. So I really like to label where stuff came from so I can figure out, well, where did I get this? We leverage the reference standards. I love this because they're always up to date, and even on imported documents, once we set them up and link them, they are always there. Now, I saw that somebody had a question on this. Are you able to reference two versions of the same standard? And I'm going to assume that this question came from, well, in Texas, we're like, you know, we use this version of this code or reference standard, and other jurisdictions use a different one. So you can import, you can create a reference standard on your own, and like it will link, and you can put the 2010 version or the 2015, or you can use that, or you can create a choice field on those. So yes, you can. There's always more than one way to do something, and no way is wrong. And I'm always interested in questions like this because I'm like, I want to try that. That sounds interesting. Okay. So we customize our project. We can customize your projects with your own photos and hyperlinks. And I think we talked to Gary and I talked about that previously. SpecLink has manufacturer links and things in the notes pane, but I like to add our own stuff. For example, for fire extinguishers, nobody really understands, and the younglings in the office don't understand what a vertical duo fire extinguisher is. And so I snapped a picture of it and I put the picture in the viewing pane and said, this is like the one we have in the office. Okay, so this is when you have specialized equipment, you know, that you have to use, that your clients want. We put a picture and we put a link to the website, or so you can do that in the viewing pane. And I really like to do that because it's like really great for reference. You can link your related sections. These sections are linked and they activate or deactivate, never leaving a reference to a section that's actually not in the project manual. I hate getting dinged on this one, okay? We maintain your corporate memory. There are codes in the documents that show things that are user added. Our Word documents have yellow highlighting, and every time I have to take that out. But in your SpecLink, there's a little in the side pane. It shows if it's been added. So you have your out of the box SpecLink, and when I start adding stuff, you can always know what is standard SpecLink language and what is language that's been added by a user. Let's see, and maintenance. So easy to maintain the documents with just changing things in one place, and you can see what's been done every time. So I'm going to go back to collaborating with others through commenting. So now that so many people are working remotely, collaboration is even more critical. And so I'm going to expand upon this on our next slide. Go ahead. So so now we have no more unwieldy PDFs with text boxes and arrows. You have a streamlined and better communication process back and forth in each individual section. You aren't in a separate document. You're a working file that you can even assign certain people and sections to review. So you can see over at the bottom right of the screen here, you can see when we talk about vinyl sheet flooring, we don't use vinyl flooring at Perkins & Will because of sustainability. So I've said that, and I've said, what are some better alternatives? And Andrea has answered me here. I'll check with our interior designer on product preferences. Now, if she checks with the interior designer, our interior designer can come in on this same comment pane here, and they can comment right here in the document. So your comments are always right here. You can see the comments that are resolved. You can see comments that are open, or you can see comments that are both. So once we decide, okay, we're going to use this, or our owner prefers to use this type of flooring, a little thing at the top you can push, and it says resolved, and you can resolve it. Now they never go away. You can always go back and see. And one of the things that we really like is that about this is we can always go back and view the resolved comments for a historical record. And one of my clients really likes to use this a lot. They go back and they go, why did we choose this? What's the purpose of this? And they look in the resolved comments, and that's a really valuable tool. And let's go to the next slide here. So here's a brief overview of the workflow that I've kind of used, and I've also helped my clients who want to their masters developed. And there are three basic steps. You can create and edit your project, and creating a project is very similar to creating a master file in the cloud. So you create your projects, and it's very easy to create your projects and start. You edit right there in the project, and you include the sections that you need, and it's a single, always updated repository. It's always in one place for your master. So like I said previously, you collaborate and comment directly in the project. So the projects can be worked on together, and they can be shared with outside reviewers too. And this is really great right now because we're all working remotely, and you can also have your consultants collaborate in here too. And then when you export and create your project manual from your masters, you can go, like Gary said earlier, from Word, or you can go to PDF. You can combine the entire project manual with other consultants, and this is why you would go old school and like export it to a PDF for most of the time, because sometimes you have a hybrid between cloud users and people who are still using basic Word documents. So then you can export your PDFs and combine them with everyone else. Now, if you have an addendum, a lot of people ask us, well, how do you handle an addendum? You can copy the project and rename it to an addendum and alter your template as needed, and you can activate any added sections, or you can just export from your original file into a Word file and do it that way. And you can use your track changes, and your track changes can be transferred over, and just like you would do in a regular Word or PDF. So that's it for me.
Good deal. Holly, thank you so much.